Deciding to find out the price of her husband's gift, the wife returned it to the jeweler. And upon overhearing a conversation between her mother-in-law and the mistress near the display, the time was approaching evening, and Scarlett was still busy in the kitchen with dinner. One dish was frying, another was boiling, and a third was cooling in a special container. Sometimes, cooking, like beauty, requires sacrifices, and nearly every hostess would agree. Today, Scarlett wanted to treat her husband to something special. After all, they say the way to a man's heart is through his stomach. She prepared his favorite roast and a fresh vegetable salad. She didn't forget to set out a fruit platter on the table. And in the refrigerator, a bottle of dry wine was waiting for its moment. Everything just the way Frederick likes it. Suddenly, the kitchen door creaked open, and her mother-in-law appeared in the doorway. "Oh, what a romantic dinner you have here. And on what money did you arrange such a banquet?" Scarlett noticeably blushed, but still replied, "Oh, come on, Samantha. I just wanted to make something tasty for Frederick." The mother-in-law nodded, and a sly smile played on her lips. "To pamper him. That's nice, of course. But I have a feeling you're trying to suck up to Frederick. Come on, confess what you're planning? Another new outfit, perhaps?" Scarlett froze in disbelief. There it was, her mother-in-law's low opinion of her, nothing more to say. Her mood soured instantly, and the desire to continue cooking dwindled to zero. Samantha Adamson lingered a bit longer, peering into every pot, then left the kitchen with a haughty air. Scarlett had encountered her negativity several times before and generally knew how to respond. But today, Samantha's remark struck her right in the heart. To suck up. What an unpleasant word. If anyone needs to smooth things over, it should be Frederick, not me. He showed up again last night around midnight. Said he was working, but the smell of women's perfume was wafting from him, Scarlett thought, her lips pressed together in indignation. She tried not to think about it, struggling to drown out the growing emptiness and pain inside her. Frederick was her first and only man. Her love for him felt blind and all-consuming to everyone. She believed in his promises and words that sounded so beautiful and sweet. But as it turned out, they were just empty sounds. At that moment, Scarlett recalled her friend's words, who worked as a manicurist in one of the beauty salons. "Oh, you naive Scarlett. You work in a hospital, but you've never seen life. When a man starts coming home later than usual, it's the first sign that he's cheating." In response, Scarlett would only wave it off, feeling guilty for not being able to give her husband an heir. They had tried countless times, but it was all in vain. Neither doctors nor folk healers had helped, and as a surgeon, Scarlett felt embarrassed to consult them, considering it a relic of the past. She would never have gone to that healer, Joanna, if it hadn't been for her mother-in-law, who insisted on the visit. "What are you talking about? How could you pass up such an opportunity? She's only here for a couple of days. They say families find happiness again after her sessions." Scarlett, of course, didn't believe in any fortune-tellers, healers, or soothsayers, but she still went to see Joanna, who ultimately gave her a rather ambiguous piece of advice: to pay more attention to her husband. Scarlett was surprised then, not realizing that her mother-in-law had previously given Joanna a certain sum of money for the necessary phrases she wanted to hear. Twilight slowly enveloped the city, covering it with a shimmering blanket of lights. Scarlett sat at the table, lost in thought. Frederick was supposed to be home an hour ago. Dinner had long since cooled, but time dragged on inexorably, leaving behind a tormenting emptiness. Scarlett stood up and approached the window, pulling back the light, almost weightless curtains. In the light of the street lamps, she saw a familiar figure approaching the house. As usual, her husband had left the car parked. Her heart raced as Frederick entered the living room and dropped his work briefcase on the floor. She hurried to meet him, but her steps froze when Scarlett noticed her husband's sullen expression. "Hi, Frederick," she said quietly. "Good evening," he replied, not looking at her, and walked into the bathroom, leaving her alone. Soon, the sound of water could be heard, and Frederick's satisfied voice hummed some tune. A few minutes later, he came out, already changed into his casual clothes. "Dinner, as always, in the fridge?" he muttered, "or did you think to heat it up?" Scarlett struggled to hold back tears. There were no questions about her day or any warm words. She felt like a stranger in this house, which had become a trap of her own marriage. Just like that, without saying a word, Frederick began devouring the dinner, as if it wasn't Scarlett who had cooked it at the stove all evening, but he had ordered takeout from a restaurant. After dinner, he settled on the couch and immersed himself in watching the news. Scarlett watched her husband from the side, involuntarily noting his absent gaze and some sense of relaxation. "Frederick, we need to talk," she whispered. Her husband tore his gaze away from the screen and looked at her with irony. "And what do you want to talk about?" "About us and our marriage as a whole. I feel like we are drifting apart." "You come home late, and we hardly talk," Scarlett replied. Frederick shook his head. "Well, I work a lot, Scarlett, trying to provide for our family's needs." Suddenly, she felt a pang of jealousy. The person she once loved with all her heart now seemed completely foreign to her. To be honest, Scarlett couldn't even remember the last time they had been happy together. Suddenly, Frederick got up from the couch and walked over to her. Scarlett tensed, fearing an outburst of anger, but instead, her husband handed her a small velvet box. "Here, this is for you." "For me?" the wife exclaimed in surprise. Scarlett's hands trembled. When she opened the gift, inside lay an exquisite gold bracelet adorned with diamonds. "Oh my God!" she whispered. From the hallway, a low, slightly mocking voice immediately rang out. "Well, did you appreciate it, dear daughter-in-law? It was worth the wait." Scarlett flinched and turned around. In the doorway stood Samantha, wearing the same sly smile on her lips. "Frederick, that's so sweet of you," she purred, "although, I think you should work less and pay more attention to yourself." "Thank you, dear," Scarlett said softly, carefully putting the bracelet on her wrist. Samantha immediately moved closer to examine the jewelry. "Yes, a beautiful piece. It must be worth a lot of money. It's just a shame that this piece will adorn the wrist of an ordinary doctor." Scarlett frowned. "What do you mean by that?" "Only that it's high time you climbed the career ladder, my dear." Samantha scoffed. "But it seems my son is completely uninterested." Scarlett turned pale. She knew that Samantha Adamson loved to mock her, but humiliating her publicly in front of her husband was low. Thanks to her mother-in-law, the joy of the gift had diminished. Even Frederick was acting passively, as if he had reluctantly handed his wife the present. After all, despite everything, this is not a cheap item. Just look at how much the precious stones alone are worth. And the quality is high. I wonder how much this bracelet costs and where Frederick got the money to buy it. He himself said that business has been, to put it mildly, not going well lately, Scarlett thought, admiring how the light danced off the finely cut facets of the tiny diamond. Meanwhile, Frederick mumbled something incoherent as a good-night wish and went to bed, while Scarlett remained in the kitchen for a long time, pondering the twists of fate and her husband's gift. What was it? An attempt to appease her or a farewell gift? Scarlett looked more closely at the velvet box and noticed a fragment of a price tag stuck to the bottom. To her astonishment, the name of the jewelry store remained intact on the piece of paper. "Madaz," Scarlett whispered softly, catching herself thinking that she wanted to know the price of this item at all costs. To be honest, she didn't even know why she wanted to know. She just felt the need to, if only to know how much her husband was willing to spend after 7 years of marriage. At night, when Frederick was already asleep, Scarlett lay still, staring into the darkness. At that moment, she was still thinking about the bracelet, her husband's strange behavior, and her mother-in-law's undisguised delight. Why did Frederick give me such an expensive gift? Scarlett wondered. He has never been generous. And where did the money come from all of a sudden? Different, unpleasant, and troubling thoughts began to arise in her mind. Could he have gotten into debt? Or, worse, did Frederick have another woman, and he decided to part with her through this farewell gesture? No, that can't be, Scarlett whispered to herself, pushing away the unwanted thoughts, but doubts, like wheat seeds, began to sprout in her soul, robbing her of peace. The next morning, after Frederick left for work and Samantha went out on errands, Scarlett drank a cup of coffee and headed to the jewelry store. She needed to be at work by 10, so she had a bit of time to spare. The store was located in the center and was a true temple for jewelry lovers. The display cases, illuminated and sparkling, gleamed and beckoned with their beauty. Inside, there was an atmosphere of luxury and elegance. The walls were lined with light marble, and the floor was covered with a soft carpet of rich burgundy color. Diamonds, rubies, emeralds, sapphires, silver, and gold jewelry sparkled in the display cases as if showcasing precious stones. The air was filled with the scent of expensive perfumes and soft music. Behind the counter, surrounded by sparkling showcases, stood the consultants, young people in impeccable suits. "Hello. I want to know the price of this bracelet," Scarlett politely began, approaching one of the salespeople. As she approached the showcase, she took the velvet box with the bracelet from her bag and showed it. The consultant squinted, carefully inspecting the jewelry. "A beautiful bracelet," he said, smiling slightly, "made of 750 gold with top-quality diamonds. This is a new addition to our collection." And the salesperson announced the price. Scarlett gasped and froze in place, stunned. How much? That amount was unreal to her. Frederick couldn't possibly afford such a purchase just like that, without taking funds from his business. Where did he get the money? At that moment, Scarlett involuntarily glanced at the far showcase, where, to her immense surprise, she saw Samantha Adamson. Her mother-in-law, smiling sweetly, was talking to a young woman whom Scarlett had never seen before. From the side, they looked like close friends. They laughed, gestured, and discussed something. "Yes. Frederick is so grateful that you helped him," Scarlett heard her mother-in-law's voice. She moved closer and listened. "The bracelet is wonderful, but I would have preferred emeralds," replied the stranger in a soft, languorous voice. "Well, Beatrice, Frederick said it was hard for him to choose between emeralds and diamonds, but he knows you prefer sparkling stones. Actually, he wanted to please me with the gift, but had to give it to that fool to avoid a scandal too soon. You know Frederick is going through a divorce right now. Oh, it couldn't come at a worse time. His new investors are all family-oriented people. They need to see Frederick as a model family man. Just wait a bit. He'll get divorced, but only later," Samantha whispered. Scarlett froze in place. Her heart clenched with pain. She understood who this woman was, some Beatrice, her husband's mistress. The bracelet was meant for her, but it was purchased for his mother, whose birthday was tomorrow. And that would be fine, except that it was Frederick's wealthy mistress who paid for it. Apparently, she decided to win over her mother-in-law for a more stable relationship with her son. Scarlett suddenly felt like a toy, a doll used in someone else's games. She still couldn't believe she had been deceived and given a counterfeit love. "Tell Frederick I'm expecting him on Friday evening," Beatrice continued, casting a sweet glance at Samantha. Scarlett slowly backed away. Her legs felt weak, her head spun, and she felt broken and alone. It hurt so much and was incredibly disappointing. She had poured all her love and faith into this relationship, and what did she get in return? Lies, deceit, disdain? Scarlett slowly made her way to the exit, feeling tears streaming down her cheeks. The bracelet remained in the hands of the consultant, who tried to call out to Scarlett, but she didn't hear him. In her soul, there was a void, vast and bottomless. And she didn't care whether her mother-in-law saw her or not. The illusion she had cherished so carefully had turned to dust. But now she was awakened and looked at her husband with new eyes. Scarlett realized that she had never been loved and that her relationship with Frederick had merely been a theater, where she played the role of a naive simpleton working as a surgeon. Scarlett stepped out of the store onto the street and stopped, gazing into the bustling world around her. At that moment, she realized she needed to start her life anew, but without Frederick, without deceit, and without pain. Scarlett had to find the strength to build her own future, a happiness not based on lies. After thinking for a moment, she took out her phone and, with trembling hands, dialed Frederick's number. Her husband answered the phone with obvious displeasure. "What's going on, Scarlett? I asked you not to call me during work hours." "Frederick." "I'm filing for divorce," she blurted out, unable to hold back. A deafening silence followed. Scarlett could only hear her own breathing, heavy and labored. "What? Are you joking?" Frederick finally rasped. "No, I'm not joking. I can't do this anymore." "We are both unhappy in this marriage," Scarlett replied firmly. "Scarlett, how can you say that?" Her husband pleaded. "We've been through so much together." "Exactly why our relationship has turned into a lie," she said. "Is it really a lie?" "This could just be a difficult period, and we'll get through it together," Frederick countered. "Don't lie to me," Scarlett cut him off sharply, "and don't lie to yourself either. I know I haven't always been the perfect husband, but I love you, and we can fix everything." "No, we can't," Scarlett sighed. "I don't love you anymore." "You can't just leave like this," Frederick continued to plead. "We have a family." "Family is when people are happy together, Frederick. And we haven't been that for a long time. Especially not with your mother around." Desperation tinged Frederick's voice. "Scarlett, you have to understand, we have obligations." "What obligations?" she asked. "To whom?" "To my investors," Frederick mumbled. She was stunned and still couldn't believe that her husband had used her as a pawn in his business games. "What do you mean, to the investors?" "Well," Frederick hesitated, "you know our company is looking for foreign partners, and people from neighboring countries really appreciate family traditions. They prefer to invest in companies where the leaders have a strong family background." Scarlett laughed. "Are you serious? You want me to stay with you for the sake of money?" "Well, no, of course not," her husband quickly replied, "but I'm asking you, let's postpone the divorce until I sign the contract with the investors." "Absolutely not," Scarlett replied resolutely. "I won't sacrifice my time for your career. I've already wasted so many years on you." "Scarlett, please, think about it, okay? It's just for a few months. Then we can get divorced," Frederick persisted. "I'm tired of your lies. You've let me down so many times, and I don't believe a single word you say. I won't let you control my life anymore." "Scarlett, but I love you," Frederick shouted into the phone. "Do you really think I'm asking you for this for no reason?" "I'm not thinking anything anymore," Scarlett cut him off. "I'm filing for divorce, and nothing will make me change my mind." "How can this be?" "I never thought you would leave me," her husband tried to play on her sympathy. "Well, now you know how wrong you were," Scarlett replied and hung up the call. Tears streamed down her cheeks. Her heart ached with pain, but she knew this was the only way to start a new life. Scarlett entered the department like a ghost, pale and very upset. Where would she be without her patients? Habitually, she put on her lab coat, her name badge, and, slightly adjusting her hair, headed towards the nurse's station. "Good morning, Scarlett," Sharon said with a weary smile. "We have a very interesting patient today." "What do you mean?" She frowned, feeling a strange tremor begin to envelop her. "A vagrant," the nurse lowered her voice. "Found him on the street, almost dead. The injury is horrific. It seems the department head is doubtful." Saying this, she glanced around cautiously, as if afraid someone might overhear them. "The orderlies are whispering that the guy is already a goner and should be sent to the morgue." Scarlett shuddered, mentally picturing the unpleasant scene. A young, mangled body, where a barely noticeable spark of life still flickers, so easily extinguished. She had seen such cases before, and each time it pained her. A doctor is a fighter by nature, and Scarlett had always fought for every life, no matter the cost. At that moment, a stretcher with a patient was wheeled out of the reception area. A young man lay on it. His face looked pale, and only his bluish lips stood out sharply against the whiteness of his skin. His clothes were torn and dirty. Scarlett looked closer. He appeared to be no older than 30. His pulse was barely detectable. Scarlett leaned down to the young man, pressing her palm against his neck. "Blood pressure is critically low," she said, looking at the nurse who was holding the blood pressure monitor. "And where do we send him now?" The attending physician grumbled. "To the morgue, I suppose, Mr. Forrest," Scarlett whispered. "What else can we do here?" Scarlett stood there, as if enchanted. Her heart ached. She knew that in cases like this, when there was no hope, medical staff often lost their vigilance and gave up. But not her. "Wait!" Scarlett suddenly turned to the orderlies who were already wheeling the stretcher out of the department. "Bring him back." "What happened, Miss Scarlett?" the attending physician asked in surprise. "I'll take care of him," she said. "I will operate. There's still a chance to save him." "Are you joking? This guy is already in agony. He has maybe 5 minutes left to live. He's bleeding internally. His organs are damaged. This is suicide." "It's not even worth trying," Forrest Addington exclaimed, eyes wide. "I'm just asking you to help me. At least give him a chance. I'll operate on him. And we need blood matching his type. And who will be responsible if something goes wrong?" Forrest declared. "Scarlett, you could lose your license, and really, why ruin your career over some unfortunate guy? I'm willing to take the risk. I'm a doctor, and I'll take full responsibility," Scarlett said firmly. A spark ignited in her eyes. She felt everything boiling inside her, like in an overheated kettle. At that moment, against the backdrop of her personal drama, her professional pride bubbled with inner strength and compassion. She didn't care about her fatigue, disappointment, or broken heart. All she wanted right now was to save this hopeless guy whom everyone had abandoned. "All right," Forrest relented. "But if something goes wrong, I warned you. All the risk is now on you." "Thank you. I won't let you down," Scarlett replied. "What about us?" one of the orderlies asked with dissatisfaction. "What to do? What to do?" Forrest Addington scratched his head. "Bring him back inside, and urgently inform the intensive care unit to prepare a bed. Also, call in an anesthesiologist." He could already envision the upheaval the hospital director would create upon learning that Scarlett was operating on a near corpse without his permission. She quickly put on a sterile gown and gloves. Her movements were swift and confident. "Prepare the tools for a thoracotomy," she commanded, "and prepare blood. All types, just in case." "Scarlett?" The anesthesiologist looked up. "Are you sure he can withstand anesthesia?" "I'm not sure, Brittany, but we have to try." Scarlett looked at the unresponsive young man. "His body is weak, but there's still a chance. Let's check him for functional tests on external respiration and myocardial contractile function," Brittany suggested. "Let's do an ECG." "Let's go." Scarlett responded and got to work. In the operating room, a tense silence reigned, interrupted only by the sound of medical instruments and Scarlett's quick breathing. "Miriam," Scarlett addressed the operating nurse, "prepare the table and also the instruments for a laparotomy. We need a quick diagnosis." "What's his pulse?" "Weak. Arrhythmia, blood pressure is dropping," the nurse replied anxiously. "Prepare the blood. Type O negative, just in case." "Mrs. Scarlett, are you sure?" Miriam asked again, looking at her with concern. "Yes, I'm sure. He has a chance, and we will use it," she replied, quickly putting on sterile gloves and taking the scalpel. "Midline incision," she commanded. "Miriam, pass me the retractor." The operation lasted several hours. Scarlett worked like a machine. Her hands were steady, her movements fluid and precise. She saw everything: tissue tears, damage, and bleeding. "Miriam, pass the silk sutures." We need to stitch up the vessel. And another syringe of adrenaline. His pulse is dropping. Scarlett was out of breath, but continued to operate. She knew that every movement she made could either save this unresponsive stranger's life or cause him serious harm. Finally, the last stitch, the clamp. Scarlett straightened up, feeling an incredible weakness throughout her body, but she saw the young man's heart beginning to beat rhythmically, the color of his face becoming more even. After the operation, she felt drained, like a squeezed lemon, but at the same time, she left the operating room with a deep sense of satisfaction. Her heart, shattered by personal drama, found solace in saving the life of a homeless vagrant whom everyone had turned their back on, delivering a silent verdict. Not even half an hour had passed before the hospital director summoned her. Scarlett's heart sank. She already suspected what awaited her, a breach of protocol, disregard for instructions, and arrogance. "Scarlett," began Donald Aldrich, sitting at his large desk in his office, "do you think you have the right to make decisions for the head physician of the department?" "I acted in the interest of the patient," Scarlett replied calmly, though she felt her hands shaking. "In the interest of the patient?" The chief scoffed. "You took it upon yourself to perform surgery without the appropriate permission. You risked his life and the reputation of your colleagues." "He was on the brink of death," she replied, "and I didn't have time to wait for permission." "You broke every possible rule," Donald slammed his fist on the table. "You're a young doctor, and you should know your place." "Yes, I'm a doctor," Scarlett answered, "and my job is to save lives." "And what if he had died on the operating table? Do you even understand what you're facing?" The chief exclaimed, leaning forward. "I understand, but I don't regret my decision," Scarlett replied. "Don't regret it?" The hospital director stood up and began pacing back and forth in the office. "You are an irresponsible and undisciplined individual. I'm just trying to be a good doctor and did everything I could to save this patient. And I will take full responsibility for my actions." "Are you sure? You know you risk losing your medical license." Donald exclaimed louder than necessary. "I'm sorry, but I couldn't do otherwise," Scarlett couldn't hold back. "A disgrace to our clinic," said the director. "I already regret hiring you. Believe me, this entire situation with the vagrant is going to come back to haunt us." Scarlett remained silent, fully aware that her actions could have serious consequences. "Well, I understand your position," the hospital director finally said, "but I cannot forgive you for breaking discipline. You are receiving a formal reprimand. And if something like this happens again, I will be forced to take more serious measures." Scarlett silently left the office, feeling tired and somewhat disappointed. She had been reprimanded and criticized. Scarlett felt like her strength was waning, but she didn't want to return to her husband's and mother-in-law's house. Her home, once a cozy nest, now seemed foreign and lifeless. Scarlett took her phone from her bag and called her friend. "Jacqueline, can I come over? I just have nowhere else to go." "Of course, dear," her friend replied. "Anytime. I'm always happy to see you." Scarlett arrived at Jacqueline's late in the evening. Her friend greeted her at the door with a hug, and they silently walked into the living room. "What happened, sweetheart?" Jacqueline asked, pouring 2 cups of coffee. Scarlett told her everything, about the complicated operation, the divorce, the furious hospital director, and her own sense of hopelessness. "Wow, Scarlett, the whole city is buzzing," her friend exclaimed, handing her a plate with a couple of hot sandwiches. "Can you believe it? Some thugs tried to kidnap the daughter of a foreign businessman. The girl is little, just a tiny thing. They ambushed her when she was out in the park with her nanny. They attacked, tied up the governess, and dragged her into the bushes. The girl started crying for help, and some vagrant fought them off." Jacqueline paused, looking intently at her friend and waiting for her reaction. What are you saying?" Scarlett slowly lifted her eyes to her friend, and something clicked in her head. "Yes, everyone is saying he's a real hero. He got seriously injured but saved the little girl. They found him unconscious next to her. The girl was trying to stop his bleeding, pressing a maple leaf to his wound. Silly girl. What can you expect from her? Scarlett felt her heart stop. And he's probably the one I saved. This thought slowly but surely erased all her doubts. Jacqueline, Scarlett slowly rose from the table. Are you sure it was a vagrant? Yeah, all the news outlets are reporting it. They say he was in dirty rags, with unkempt hair, and his face was dirty. And where was he injured? Scarlett felt her face flush. In the abdomen, I think. Jacqueline squinted one eye. They wrote something about a stab wound. Some passerby helped him later. According to the journalists, he's in critical condition at the hospital, but the doctors say he'll pull through. His name is Alfred. He didn't have time to give his last name. So, I saved a hero? Scarlett whispered, covering her face with her hands. Only then did Jacqueline understand the true reason for her tears. All right, my friend, it's time to sleep. Take a shower and get some rest. Tomorrow is a new day. We'll see what happens then. I've already made the bed for you. My husband is away on a business trip, so you can stay for a week for sure. Scarlett nodded in agreement and shuffled off to the bathroom. However, she wouldn't be able to get a good night's sleep that night. For half the night, she replayed the events in her mind. Emotions mixed into one big knot. The bitterness of her impending divorce from Frederick, pride in her actions, and an indescribable feeling that she couldn't quite characterize. Concern, anxiety, affection, tenderness for the homeless man she barely knew. Scarlett tossed and turned in bed. The sheets tangled into knots, reflecting the chaos of her thoughts. The moonlight filtered through the thin lace curtains, casting whimsical shadows on the walls, but it couldn't chase away the turmoil that gripped Scarlett's soul. In her mind, like a scratched record, the same scene from the past kept playing. A memory of the day her life changed forever after meeting Frederick. Her heart raced at the mere thought of him. Of those strong arms and incredibly beautiful eyes that looked at her with such tenderness and admiration. Scarlett suddenly felt his presence, the love that had faded away, and even his scent, masculine and refreshingly subtle. How did it all begin for us? She whispered, diving into the depths of her memories. College life was buzzing. Laughter and conversations melded into a joyful chorus. The sun, generous and gentle, bathed a small, cozy glade in bright light. This was the long-awaited picnic that Scarlett's group had been planning for weeks. Fun, jokes, music, all mixed into an exciting cocktail. Scarlett, in her light dress, felt incredibly light and free. Her long chestnut hair danced in the wind, and the sun's rays illuminated her joyful face, making it even more delicate and beautiful. She was at the center of events, always ready to help, support, and share her optimism. Caroline, why do you look so sad? Scarlett asked her classmate, sitting down next to her. You were smiling all day, and now you're all pensive like an owl? No, I just got a little distracted, Caroline replied, trying to hide her slight anxiety. Don't worry, everything will be fine, Scarlett squeezed her hand. It's such a wonderful day. Just look, spring, sunshine, you and me, our friends. Yeah, maybe you're right, Caroline smiled, although none of them could have imagined how that day would turn out. Suddenly, from the nearest bushes came a plaintive, high-pitched whimper. Everyone fell silent, turning toward the sound. A small, skinny, reddish puppy with frightened eyes burst out from behind the bushes. Oh, how cute! One of the girls exclaimed. Let's take him with us, suggested another student. He must be lost, Scarlett said thoughtfully. Frederick, a tall, handsome young man with a mop of dark hair and mischievous eyes, always a bit reserved but with an incredibly kind soul, was the first to take the initiative. I'll go check. Maybe the owners will turn up, he said, and without waiting for a reply, he ventured deeper into the forest. Scarlett watched him, noticing how his eyes sparkled when he smiled. Frederick, be careful, she called, watching as he navigated through the branches. This place is unfamiliar. And there's a cliff closer than it seems. Oh, come on. Are you worried? Laughed Elton, Frederick's friend, pulling a guitar out of his bag. He's not a kid, he can handle himself. Scarlett knew she was worrying unnecessarily. She was going to be a doctor, not a mother. But for some reason, her heart raced. At that moment, a piercing, terrified scream shattered the silence. Everyone jumped to their feet. "Frederick!" Scarlett cried, her heart tightening with fear. Soon, she saw him at the very edge of the cliff. Frederick's face was contorted in pain as he tried to grab a branch, which couldn't hold his weight and broke instead. Below, between the roots, rusty rebar glinted, and just the sight of it made everyone's blood run cold. Without thinking, Scarlett rushed towards him. "Frederick, hold on!" she shouted, grabbing onto a tree root and climbing down. "Scarlett!" I can't," the guy croaked. His breathing was labored. "Shoo, everything will be fine," Scarlett whispered, putting in the effort to lower herself further. Finally, she managed to reach him and grab his hand. "Please, help!" she cried out to her friends. As if waking from a dream, Elton rushed to help her, and together they exerted superhuman effort to pull Frederick up. The guy lay on his back, pale as chalk. His breathing was accompanied by wheezing, and fear was frozen in his eyes. Scarlett leaned over him. "Frederick, how are you?" "Alive, I guess," he exhaled, then smiled. In his eyes, Scarlett saw such genuine gratitude that her heart fluttered with joy. "Well, that's good," she whispered, reassuring herself. "Now rest. We'll look for some water for you." Scarlett watched as her friends busied themselves around Frederick, and her thoughts were solely occupied with him. She felt something for this young economist that she had never experienced before. It was not just compassion, but something deeper, warmer, and more troubling. "Thank you, Scarlett," Frederick said when they brought him water. "It seems you saved my life." "No need to mention it. The main thing is that you're okay," she replied, her cheeks flushing. The puppy that had caused all this suddenly took off and ran into the woods. "Well, there he goes," Frederick said, regaining some composure. "Now he'll definitely get lost." "Oh, come on," Scarlett replied, leaning down. "There's a village nearby. He'll smell the homes and come back." "Well, maybe," Frederick agreed and smiled again. There was so much warmth and happiness in his smile that Scarlett felt breathless. And she realized that, perhaps, she had fallen in love. They spent the rest of the day together, talking and laughing, and Scarlett discovered Frederick from a completely different side. He was not just a senior student and a guest in their medical group. He was smart, sensitive, and incredibly attractive. Soon their communication grew into something more, into tender feelings, into love. Scarlett and Frederick mostly dated in secret due to the guy's mother. Walking under the moonlight, they whispered sweet words to each other and came up with cute nicknames. "Scarlett, I love you," Frederick said one day, holding her hand. "You're the best girl I've ever met." "And I love you," she replied, pressing her body against him. Unfortunately, all of this turned out to be just an illusion, which didn't withstand the test of time and resulted in infidelity with a wealthy woman. Scarlett could only push away the haunting memories and finally fall asleep. The next morning greeted her with bright rays of sunlight filtering through the curtains in Jacqueline's room. She woke up with the feeling that her life was about to change today. Despite the heaviness of yesterday, a spark of hope flickered in Scarlett's heart. First, after a hasty breakfast with her friend, she decided to visit her patient. At the hospital, she was greeted with open arms. The doctors and nurses who had deemed Scarlett reckless the day before now looked at her with respect, some even with reverence. She had saved the life of a man who had suddenly become a hero. Surgeon Scarlett Barrington, they pronounced her name with respect. In the eyes of the young female doctor, there shone a confidence that was not only the result of professionalism but also of pride in her accomplished deed. "Scarlett, you're a real magician," said Chloe Ballman, the head nurse, when the doctor entered Alfred's room. Oh, don't exaggerate. I just did my job, Scarlett replied, trying to hide the excitement that overwhelmed her. The room was silent, and only the sound of the Ford drip reminded them of the recent tragedy. Alfred lay with his eyes closed. His face, surrounded by white bandages, was pale, but now it no longer expressed the hopelessness it had the day before. The patient is slowly coming to, Chloe said, watching the doctor's reaction. He opened his eyes yesterday. Has anyone contacted his relatives? Scarlett asked, trying not to reveal her anxiety. No, he won't answer questions, doesn't want anyone near him, the head nurse sighed sadly. Why not? Scarlett couldn't help but ask. Doesn't he have any family? Who knows? Chloe shrugged. He just appeared in the park, like a guardian angel, and that's it. Scarlett approached the bed where the patient lay. She studied his face closely. There was something familiar about the features of the vagrant. Alfred. She softly called, as if afraid to startle him. Who's there? The man rasped, opening his eyes. There was something mysterious in his gaze, something incomprehensible. It's me, Scarlett, she said, smiling. I operated on you yesterday. Scarlett, he repeated, as if trying to remember something important. Yes, you're a real hero. A hero? Alfred grimaced. I just did what I thought was right. They were going to hurt the girl. Her name was Eva. And I felt sorry for the nanny. An elderly woman. What did she do wrong? Eva. Scarlett repeated the name as if trying to keep it forever in her memory. Do you know her or her parents? Alfred asked, grimacing from pain. No, Scarlett replied, feeling her cheeks flush. I just heard about it. The whole town is buzzing like a beehive about it. I'm just glad I could help. Thank you, said Alfred, and in his voice there was an indescribable warmth. I'm grateful to you. Can you imagine? I had a wonderful dream today. I was lying among the dead in the morgue, and then a woman in a white coat came and took me to the land of the living. Scarlett smiled, and as if trying to hide her feelings, she asked, Yes, that's quite an interesting dream. How do you feel overall? Better, thanks to you, he replied, and at that moment, Scarlett felt that an invisible connection had formed between them, one that defied logical explanation. No need to mention it. Get well, she said, fully realizing that her life had changed forever from that moment on. Scarlett stood by the window, watching him while simultaneously observing her reflection in the glass. Suddenly, the silence of the room was shattered by the sharp sound of the door opening. Scarlett quickly turned and saw a man at the threshold who seemed to radiate confidence in his very presence. Tall, stern, with a flawless appearance. He was dressed in a sharp suit that accentuated his perfect physique. Scarlett noticeably tensed. Who was this? You must be Scarlett Barrington? The stranger asked. Yes, that's me, she replied, still taken aback by his sudden appearance. And you are? Gordon Charles, the man introduced himself with a slight smile. Eva's father. Alfred, whose eyes had been focused on the doctor, suddenly tensed noticeably. Eva? He mumbled. Gordon Charles approached the bed and extended his hand to Alfred. Yes, that's right. You saved my daughter yesterday. I am endlessly grateful to you. Alfred, somewhat surprised, shook Gordon's hand. The vagrant stammered, searching for words, I just didn't want her to be harmed. I know, and I want to thank you for that. For not being afraid. For saving my daughter. Scarlett, still bewildered, silently observed the two men. She couldn't understand what was happening. I honestly didn't expect that, Alfred stumbled again. What didn't you expect? Gordon looked at him intently. That you would come, Alfred replied, blushing. I promised Eva that I would thank her savior, and I intend to keep my word. You showed real courage, Gordon said, his gaze warming. Alfred seemed to be at a loss for words. You're overestimating me. No, no, I'm not. You're a true hero. When you recover and regain your strength, I'd like to offer you a job. A good one, with decent pay and the chance to start a new life. A job? Alfred looked at Scarlett as if seeking her support. Gordon nodded affirmatively. Of course. You're a brave man, and I'm sure you can handle any task. Finally, Scarlett decided to intervene in the conversation. Gordon Charles, she said, stepping closer, I think Alfred isn't ready for such changes yet. He needs time to recover. I understand, but I want him to know he can count on my help. There's no rush for an answer, Gordon smiled. All right, I'll think about it, Alfred nodded. Good, Gordon said. Then I'll let you have some peace. He turned to Scarlett and extended his hand again. Thank you so much, Scarlett Barrington. I don't know how to express my gratitude for saving our hero. Scarlett, shyly smiling, shook the offered hand and replied, blushing. It's just my job, like any other. It's important for everyone and for each person individually. But it seems you do it with warmth and care, Gordon observed, looking at her with appreciation, then quietly added, You know, your last name sounds familiar to me. Is your husband, by any chance, Frederick Barrington? The businessman whose enterprise I'm planning to invest in. Scarlett blushed to the roots of her hair. Yes, you're right. That's my husband. Well, my ex-husband, actually. I filed for divorce because of his infidelity. The businessman raised his eyebrows in surprise. Oh, really? I thought he was a model family man. He told me that his wife works as a surgeon, but I never imagined it was you. Well, I'll keep that in mind when discussing the contract. Although, it's unlikely to be possible. I don't appreciate traitors. Saying this, Charles handed Scarlett a business card. It was engraved with his name and phone number, as well as the name of a large corporation. I want to express my gratitude. If anything comes up, don't hesitate to contact me. I'll help however I can. Scarlett thanked the businessman and tucked the card into her pocket. An awkward pause hung in the air, after which Gordon, nodding at Alfred once more, smiled at Scarlett and exited the room. The doctor turned to her patient. Alfred lay staring at the ceiling, still under the impression of the influential businessman's visit. I don't even know what to do, the vagrant admitted, sighing sadly. Don't rush, Scarlett said, sitting in a chair next to the bed. You've just gone through a serious trauma. You need time to recover. I'm afraid I won't have the strength to start a new life, Alfred confessed. Yes, you can. Scarlett said confidently. I believe in you. But first, treatment and rehabilitation. For a while, silence reigned in the room, interrupted only by the sound of the Ford drip. Scarlett sat, watching Alfred, and hope began to blossom in her heart. She hoped that this young patient would find his happiness and his path in life. Suddenly, the phone rang. On the screen, a video call request appeared with her mother-in-law's name. Scarlett's heart tightened, knowing who else would be in the frame besides her mother-in-law. Scarlett leaned her head back and took a deep breath, trying to cope with the surge of emotions. Hello, she said evenly and calmly, although inside, she was boiling with indignation. Frederick's face appeared on the screen. It was twisted with rage. Samantha sat next to him. Scarlett, you know perfectly well what's going on. You have no right to file for divorce, her husband began. I've made my decision. I want a divorce, Scarlett replied, trying to maintain her composure. You are not going to divorce me, Frederick barked. You are obligated to be with me. Understand, divorce is a disgrace to our family. Scarlett smirked. A disgrace? What disgrace, Frederick? The disgrace is what you're doing. Your constant infidelity, your contempt for me, your... Enough, her husband interrupted. Don't dare insult me. You should be grateful that I provided for you. You can't survive a day without me, and I will do everything to keep you. I'll tell everyone about your connection with that vagrant. Did you think I wouldn't find out? Scarlett sighed sadly. You have nothing to tell. I'm a doctor, and I save people. Alfred is one of my patients, and I couldn't care less about your threats. You'll regret this, Scarlett, Frederick hissed. Samantha, who had been watching the scene silently with anger, finally intervened in the conversation. Scarlett, you need to understand. Your actions have consequences. You are destroying our family. You are challenging everything we have built over the years. I'm not the one destroying the family. Frederick has already done that a long time ago. I just want to be free of this. Samantha looked at her daughter-in-law with disdain. Egoist. You think only of yourself. Have you forgotten who you are and where you come from? No, I haven't forgotten. I'm a surgeon, and a good one at that, and I have the right to my happiness, Scarlett replied proudly. Well, we'll see. Everything will become clear very soon. See you in court, Frederick smirked and hung up. Scarlett let out a sigh of relief and quickly left the room, leaving Alfred alone with his thoughts. A month passed unnoticed, during which he recovered from his injuries and grew closer to the woman who had saved him. The divorce proceedings between Scarlett and Frederick unfolded in a tense atmosphere. The courtroom was filled with onlookers. Whispers circulated through the rows, distracting everyone from the essence of the case. Scarlett felt numerous gazes on her, as if she had found herself on the stage of a provincial theater. She sat, clutching her hands on her knees, and tried not to look at Frederick. Her husband sat next to his lawyer, frowning and displeased. The case of Frederick Barrington's petition for divorce from Scarlett Barrington is now open, announced the judge. Does either party have any statements? Your Honor, began Frederick's lawyer, a man in his 50s with perfectly styled hair and a contemptuous smirk, we insist on preserving the marriage. Our client filed for divorce while in a state of emotional distress and does not understand the gravity of her actions. Scarlett Barrington, the judge addressed her, what is your position? She stood up and quietly began. Your Honor, I insist on the divorce. It is broken. We can no longer live together. What is the reason for the discord in your family? The judge asked. My husband is a despot and a cheater. He disrespects me, belittles me, and controls my every move. Frederick Barrington, do you confirm what your wife has said? The judge turned to him. Partially, the businessman replied. My wife tends to have emotional outbursts and is to blame for our problems. Your Honor, Frederick's lawyer interjected, we have irrefutable evidence of Scarlett's infidelity. Saying this, the lawyer pulled out several photographs from his folder. In them, Scarlett was captured with Alfred. They were sitting on a bench in the park, laughing and holding hands. This man, the lawyer pointed to the photo, Alfred Chandler, a vagrant, a beggar, is the lover of my client's wife. A murmur of indignation swept through the courtroom, whispers and buzz filled the space. Scarlett felt the color drained from her face. She had never thought she could experience such public humiliation. Alfred is my patient, she whispered. I saved his life. And you spend a lot of time with him, don't you? The lawyer smirked predatory. He seems charming, and apparently has long questioned your marital fidelity. Your Honor, this is outrageous slander. Scarlett protested. Let's not get personal, the judge intervened. We are here to consider the divorce case. Your Honor, we ask the court to take into account all the circumstances of the case. Scarlett Barrington is behaving immorally, betraying her husband. Based on the evidence presented, we believe she has no right to any division of property, the lawyer addressed the judge. And what is immoral about that? Scarlett couldn't hold back. Is it immoral that I'm trying to free myself from a cheating husband? It's that you cheated on me, Frederick lied without batting an eye. Order in the court. The judge shouted, banging his gavel on the table. We will hear witness testimonies. Scarlett looked hopefully at the door and saw Gordon Charles enter the courtroom. Frederick and his mother's moods noticeably dropped, as the businessman's resources were truly limitless. What had he uncovered? When Gordon began to speak, the room fell silent as if by the wave of a magic wand. He talked about many things, not forgetting to mention how Scarlett performed a complicated operation on Alfred, saving his young daughter. But what touched the judge and everyone present the most was something else. Apparently, 6 months ago, Frederick Barrington had acquired a mistress named Beatrice. A pleasant woman in every way, except for one, but that overshadowed all her merits. Beatrice turned out to be a professional thief specializing in stealing gold items from jewelry stores. Posing as an influential businesswoman, she would select the most expensive jewelry and secretly photograph it from all angles with her smartphone. Then, showing the sketch to a private jeweler, she would wait for him to make a replica for later replacement during a fitting. Everything went well until the moment Scarlett returned the bracelet. And that too was a fake, which the cunning Beatrice had not hesitated to give to her trusting lover's mother. Frederick regifted the bracelet to Scarlett, and she returned it to the salon, where they eventually figured out what had happened. Wearing the original bracelet made of high-quality gold, Beatrice would return the consultant a fake that was incredibly difficult to distinguish from the real item. Beatrice had been caught in 3 different regions, but like a red fox, she skillfully covered her tracks, constantly creating a new legend for herself. Today, she was a wealthy widow who inherited her late husband's assets, and tomorrow, she could be a rich heiress or a businesswoman. And so on indefinitely, until her imagination ran out. Only after giving a fake gift to Samantha Adamson to establish a trusting relationship did Beatrice make a significant misstep. But who could have known that Frederick would give the trinket to his wife, who would return it to the jewelry store where Beatrice had recently committed the fraud just 2 days prior? All this was uncovered by a private detective hired by Gordon Charles to vet the future partner in whose business he planned to invest a considerable amount. Frederick lowered his eyes. For him, this was a complete collapse. No lawyer, no matter how good, could pull him out of the hole he had fallen into because of his own stupidity. But Scarlett left the courthouse with her head held high as a winner, for waiting for her outside was Alfred, who had accepted Gordon's offer and decided to start a new life. Not alone, of course, but together with Scarlett, to whom he had proposed in front of witnesses the day before the trial.